Maybe we see Errol Spence Jr. You have the Sean Porter fight that was semi-close, a little scare. Then you have the car accident. Now you have this fight against Danny Garcia, another good fighter. You might be looking ahead at Terrence Crawford. I don't know. It's interesting. Welcome, everybody, to the Ring Generals podcast. My name is Nick Nenad. Alongside me is Eazy-E, Eric Santos.
What's cooking, guys?
And, of course, the man that wants Chick-fil-A before 10 p.m. at night because we got a curfew in California, the RKJ Man.
Let's out that talk, y'all. Hypocritical Nick.
It's the sauce, Alexander, and you're watching the Ring General podcast. Turn this man around. Subscribe, like, and comment.
But raise a glass in the sky and salute the Ring Generals.
That's right.
Hopefully, this will be better than that Nate Robinson knockout the other night.
Damn right, bro.
Although, do you want, which one do you want? Which is better, Nate Robinson getting knocked out or your Chick-fil-A sandwich? Which is better?
Oh, it's definitely a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. And unlike Nate Robinson, it lasts more than 2 minutes. So...
Yeah, just a great start to the podcast. You guys got to know that, you know, as a boxing, MMA, and pro wrestling covering podcast, I think we all had to chuckle a little when Nate Robinson had to be scraped off the Staples Center floor on Saturday. And I think at least like Eric and I, and we'll get to the fights in a second, but Eric and I we watch boxing. Like, I could tell 20 seconds into the fight, I'm like, this should not be happening. This is going to end really fucking bad. Like, really bad. Yeah. And it did. And I laughed. And then I felt bad, and then I laughed again, and then Jake Paul called out Conor McGregor, and I laughed again. So we'll get to that in a second. On this podcast, it's a good one, guys. Some interesting things to talk about. Obviously, we had Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., Jake Paul, Nate Robinson. This next Saturday, Errol Spence Jr. and Danny Garcia. There's nothing fake about that boxing match, and that will be legitimate, and that will be in AT&T Stadium as well. And we also want to start the podcast by discussing what you will be watching tonight. That is AEW Dynamite's Winter is Coming big-time show this Wednesday, headlined by Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship. I mean, pretty much, guys, the best match you could come up with, right, in AEW. So that's happening on Wednesday. It's not for $50. It's not for, it's not on a special Saturday edition. It's not on WWE. This is happening on AEW Dynamite. So we want to talk about that. We want to start that with talking about this show. But, of course, how are we doing, guys? We need to start this podcast on a positive note. We all obviously had Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fighting this Saturday, and we got big-time fights all over the place. But how are we doing here? We're recording on a Tuesday night, but, of course, you're watching this on Wednesday. We released it on Wednesday. So how are we all doing on a Tuesday night?
I think we're doing pretty good as far as that goes, although I'm still digesting from my Thanksgiving food. But other than that, I feel pretty good. Obviously, you need a good laugh, good entertainment from Jake Paul and Nate Robinson, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But either way, I'm excited for Winter is Coming, and definitely that is something that we can all tune in, not by the network, not by pay-per-view, not by anything else. It's free right there for those out there. So be sure to check it out. And I'm feeling pretty good. Pumped up.
Absolutely. Now, RKJ, I know you want to get to Chick-fil-A, so I don't want to waste too much time on this podcast. But how is RKJ doing? He's wearing his Panthers hat. He's hungry. I want to know how RKJ is doing on a Tuesday night.
Well, Thanksgiving was fantastic. It was great.
Of course it was.
Got to celebrate my niece's birthday and everything like that. But
happy birthday.
I am pissed off with the NFL for giving us so much shittiness for football on Thanksgiving. Like, I don't know what the NFL is doing, putting the Cowboys and Lions on Thanksgiving consistently, but they need to stop it because it's ridiculous. And then move on to Sunday and my Carolina Panthers and Teddy Bridgewater again. I'm just going to say this. We need a new quarterback, okay? Quarterback, I'm sick of him. I'm sick of that head coach, too. I don't know what you see in him, Nick, but I need Matt Rule and Teddy Bridgewater to go. Like, they need to go far, far away and never come back to the NFL again, just like Nicholas Batum needs to leave the NBA. But unfortunately, he got signed by your Clippers. So other than that, everything was good. But, the Panthers suck. The NFL sucks with their Thanksgiving schedule. Everybody and their moms got COVID now. We're getting to see a Pittsburgh Steelers-Ravens game today at 12:40. Well, what the hell, kid? What the hell is going on?
It's craziness. You guys don't know, though, when our RKJ, it's an understatement when he says he had a fantastic Thanksgiving, because I've been over to his house to have his food. Eric, you've been over there too. It is truly amazing. So you guys definitely missed out. And I know RKJ is still feeling some happiness from that Thanksgiving dinner. But let's get back to AEW, guys. Obviously, big time match. But I want to start by discussing this. You have this AEW Diamond Ring Battle Royal, and what this is kind of turning into somewhat is not directly the Money in the Bank ladder match, but it's kind of crowning who they think is going to be one of the big time stars the next year, by evidence of MJF winning the Diamond Ring last year, using it multiple times to his advantage, and even getting an AEW championship shot in 2020. So this is a pretty big match. It's one of the things that makes this AEW Dynamite so big. RKJ, I want to get your comments on this. What do you think about the match? What do you think about the idea of this being a kind of every year occurrence, like the Money in the Bank ladder match in WWE? And of course, who do you think is going to win?
I love the idea for it. My only problem is this going to lead to someone getting a championship opportunity? Because the Money in the Bank ladder match is pretty much an automatic championship opportunity. Now, most of the time we've seen people win the championship from Money in the Bank. It's not guaranteed, but it is, you're guaranteed at least to have a championship match. You're not guaranteed to win the title, of course. And I liked what they did last year with MJF because it was used as kind of an elevator for MJF. He used that diamond ring on several instances in order to win matches. We saw it against Cody and several other opponents. So I think it's very, very important. And when you look at this card and you look and you see who needs it, it's very important to look at that. Now, Nick, who's in this match? Because I don't know necessarily who's in this match.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't know if we have every single name on it. I will get back to you on that if you want to talk about something else, or if you want to discuss maybe what you think about or I guess you already explained it. So I'll toss it to Eric while I research it. Yeah. Eric, what are your thoughts on the same thing?
Well, At
least if you have a name off the top of your head, maybe that jumps out. So go ahead.
So the names I can read off to you guys are the participants: Adam Page, Alex Reynolds, John Silver, Sammy Guevara, Matt Hardy, Isaiah Cassidy, Mark Quinn, Matt Sydal, Scorpio Sky, Sean Spears, Orange Cassidy, Kip Sabian, Miro, Wardlow, and MJF. Those are the names that are.
That's exactly who should be in it. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, top contenders right there.
Yeah, and that's who I thought. I knew when I saw the card for it, and I was like, man, there's a lot of good names on it. So RKJ, I'll toss it back to you really quickly since he listed off, he helped you out. Who, when you think about those names, do you think initially should win this match, and then maybe with a little more thought, who really should win this match?
It's a tie for me between three people. Adam Hangman Page. You focused a lot of your storylines around him being the Millennial Cowboy. You have Orange Cassidy. I mean, that feud with Jericho definitely elevated him, right? Scorpio Sky, a guy who has been on AEW Dark, but I think he has the potential to go even farther. And having that presence, an African-American babyface really helps the situation too in AEW as well. Just for representation. But I mean, I have to go with, if I'm picking a winner right now, I'm putting all my money on it. I'm picking Adam Hangman Page to win tomorrow. He had an opportunity last year to win against MJF and he lost. And in some way, shape, or form, this kind of started his descent into the Millennial Cowboy in a way. So I think tonight, will be his redemption, and he'll find a way to come back and win that diamond ring after failing to win it last year against MJF. Now, my only thing is this: whoever wins this diamond ring, that you need to push them to the moon, and they need to have an opportunity to actually win the championship, the AEW championship. Because if, one of the criticisms did have with the MJF storyline, with him having the diamond ring, is he got a championship opportunity, but he never won it. So I want that title. I want that diamond ring to have some prestige for it. You're either going to have to keep the ring, or you're going to have to give up the ring for the championship opportunity. So that's one nuance that I would like to see. You've seen that in Lucha Underground with the Gifts of the God title. Is that correct, Eric? With the Gift of the Gods title, where you had to give up the title in order to get a championship opportunity. I would like to see that in AEW too.
RKJ, I do want to discuss this with you at least, or give my opinions on this. I have to disagree with you a little bit, because I don't necessarily want this to become directly equivalent to the Money in the Bank ladder match. And it's one of the reasons why I asked you, and I'm actually kind of glad you answered the way you did, because I actually liked the fact that MJF, he got the title match, he did everything in his power to cheat, and he still lost. And it shows you that, yes, you can be handed this, golden ticket, or in this case, a diamond ring, and it still ends up not being enough in your pursuit. Now, I will say this about one thing in this match. I feel like there might be the impending breakup of MJF and Wardlow potentially in this match. And one of the reasons, when you look at the AEW Championship match, Wardlow had something to do with that. Not intentionally, but he was one of the reasons he lost that match. And this has been building. AEW's done a great job of these long builds, subtle little things. I think if you're going to put on a pay-per-view-like show that's free on TV, I think two of the biggest faces on AEW have been Wardlow and MJF this entire 2020 year. And I feel like this is the time you break them up. And hell, maybe even you have Wardlow win the actual diamond ring back, and then he has it, and he's a monster, and he's pushed to the moon as well, which he rightfully should be. So, Eric, what's your take? You've heard RKJ. In my take, my prediction is going to be Wardlow. If you guys didn't figure that out, what do you think is going to happen in this match?
Well, without a doubt, I think you guys brought up some pretty good valid points about bringing up Adam Page, maybe winning the Battle Royal, the Diamond Ring being somewhat of a golden ticket to a championship opportunity. I kind of see it more as just a way for me, because the winner that I would see, or the two that would be inside the ring, the last two remaining, would be MJF and Sammy Guevara, because how I see Sammy Guevara is the fact that, Sammy Guevara, he's kind of a little like, I'm not sure about this MJF guy. I'm like a little bit hesitant with this dude. And I've also, you guys been noticing these past recent weeks, whenever, MJF, he's part of the inner circle, but
of course,
I feel like MJF is kind of like his own guy when he's with Wardlow. Have you seen like MJF like not really dressing up just like the rest of the guys, like those T-shirts? You see MJF kind of having like his own like gear, like his own appearance. Same with Wardlow. So it's more like I never really consider him as like part of the inner circle. He's kind of more like an associate, if you ask me. So that would kind of create some sort of tension between Sammy Guevara and MJF, as you can probably use that as a storyline, as to a way of, if Sammy Guevara wins this whole thing, it would create some tension between them, not Wardlow, but between those two guys, and set off a great feud between those two. And Jericho would have to choose between who he's going to keep, Sammy Guevara or MJF, because of the whole diamond ring. And then maybe in the future, Sammy Guevara is going to want a title shot, and that would create somewhat of a breakup between one of those two, and that would just set something for the future. So a guy I'm picking is Sammy Guevara, just for inner circle, tensions between those two. That's what
I hope AEW's booking meetings go like this. I think we just picked the 5 best guys to win this match.
We did, yeah.
I'm now excited. I actually don't know who's going to be right. Eric, that's a very good point about Sammy Guevara. That recently has been even more about what I was talking about with Wardlow. And RKJ, you named 3 guys that absolutely could win this match as well. I want to bring up one more name, a guy that's been kind of in the shadows and that might need this bump a little bit. He already has the name, and that is Shawn Spears. That's one name, a very, very dark horse to potentially win this match. RKJ, I know you're shaking your head, so I do want to get your opinion. I don't think he is. I do think he's a dark horse. He's a long shot. He's a sketchy bet to win this match. I just wanted to throw out that name out there. RKJ, what is wrong with Shawn Spears winning?
Well, Shawn Spears has said that he's going to retire very soon. He has his own wrestling academy. Obviously, that's a little bit in flux right now because of the whole COVID thing. We all know what's going on with that situation. But he says he's going to retire soon. He wants to spend more time with his wife, obviously Peyton Royce, in the WWE, and he just wants to enjoy his life a little bit more. I don't think, this whole diamond ring thing is for a person who's getting ready to retire like Shawn Spears. Shawn Spears had Tully Blanchard by his side for all these months and has not done a single thing. He's not done anything. He's, and I guess he's in a better situation. He looks a hell of a lot better than he was in WWE, but he's not doing anything. He's happier, and that's fantastic, and I'm glad he's happy. But what do you have to bring to the table? So, with all due respect, to actually prepare for the future. Right now, while we're going through this COVID thing, we need to start setting up our future stars so that way when we're back touring again, and I'm thinking like Tony Khan here, I've got credible stars, credible young stars that people will come out to see. You know what I'm saying? I keep harping on this, saying last week, hey, if you got to tell somebody you got to get a vaccine to go to this AEW show, you got to show up with a negative COVID test. Guess what? You better have a really good main event. You better have credible stars that's going to make people want to risk all this stuff just to come to your show. And I just don't think I'm going to risk all that to go see Shawn Spears, with all due respect to Shawn Spears. We met him before. Very nice guy. We met him days before he hit Cody over the head with the steel chair. But he hasn't been credible since that event. I'm sorry.
No, you bring up a good point, and I hadn't heard the rumors of that retiring. That's news to me. So, it's very interesting. Maybe he's saying that as part of kayfabe, right? You never know. Maybe it is something that turns it around, and then he ends up winning this, and he has a run in AEW because everyone thinks he's going to retire, right? It's all good wrestling, and at least I'm glad we can talk about AEW having some good things going on. So to move on from this Battle Royal. Like we just mentioned, guys, our picks, RKJ discussed Scorpio Sky, Orange Cassidy, and who was the last one you said again? The first one? Hangman Page.
Which was my official one.
In Hangman Page's his official pick. Eric brings up Sammy Guevara winning, possibly with MJF being the last participant, and I pick Wardlow winning the Diamond Ring a year after MJF does, leading to at least their eventual split up in the future next coming months. So, looking at the rest of this card, guys, we have Britt Baker wrestling someone named Layla Hirsch. I don't know who that is. So we're going to move on from that. Yeah, exactly. Sound like that's when the owls come out, when you hear Layla Hirsch.
Look, AEW's got to fix this whole women's division. Like, this situation has gotten bad. Remember when I texted you? I remember telling you guys that on the very first Dynamite, I skipped that women's match because I did not feel emotionally invested. It's the same way I feel literally a year afterwards. I do not care about the women's matches, honestly. And you're a main person, Hikaru. Is she on this paper? Is she on this show tomorrow night? Okay, so Hikaru Shida. So let's look at this. The NWA Women's Championship gets more notoriety and more credibility to it on AEW television than your own champion. Come on, guys. Like, let's be comical here. Let's think with common sense here.
I have to agree, and they put Anna Jay in a title match the other night. Someone that is a fan favorite in AEW, someone that's part of the Dark Order, someone, Dark Order itself, and not only the Dark Order, but Anna Jay kind of needs to be pumped up a little more. They haven't done much on AEW TV lately, and she loses in like 10 minutes. And it's like, come on, like, could we at least have some cheating or some, like, why are we just giving Hikaru Shida the title matches over and over again? We did have the return, though, of somebody. I don't know if I said it on this podcast, and if I did, someone tell me. But Abaddon returned after this match as well, and it's somebody that I think is credible because she's a zombie and has blood coming out of her mouth, and I think that'd be a very credible human being or whatever she is to beat Hikaru Shida, who's essentially just a Japanese wrestler. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, we at least have that RKJ in the wings. That's not going to happen on this show. It probably will happen at their next pay-per-view, whatever that title match. And I would absolutely want Abaddon to win that match. but maybe things are looking up with a dominant women's champion that's creepy and must see. At least I'll say that. I'll give you some happiness there to think about. There, but so
maybe a little bit of hope.
There ain't no hope, because who you got on the heel side besides, or the face side besides Hikaru Shida to face this woman?
Yeah, I mean that's
Randy
maybe they have somebody on the like in the wings coming in. I don't know. It's a good point, but they got to do the best. I don't mind if you do the best possible, and then you have bullshit in between and the best possible, right? Like if you don't have the women to do it, at least put the best women against each other, right? But so the rest of the card, Chris Jericho versus Frankie Kazarian in a singles match. And then you have Darby Allin, Cody Rhodes versus Team Taz, Ricky Starks, and Powerhouse Hobbs, who recently joined Team Taz. Interesting about this rivalry, and we're just going to skip over Chris Jericho and Frankie Kazarian because we don't want to really talk about that. Interesting about this rivalry is Cody and Taz is their mic spat, their talking segment on AEW resulted in Taz choking Cody out. And this is the first time, at least Eric, I've seen in a while, Taz get physical with people in the ring. And it was after Cody mentioned that Taz's son had gone to wrestle with him and learned to wrestle with him. So it's getting very, very personal. You have pure faces that Cody helped get into AEW, now turned to Team Taz. So Eric, I'll put it to you. What do you think about this rivalry? What do you think it ends up being in the future? Like, what do you think the point of this is right now?
I mean, good for Ricky Starks and Hobbs to have a major feud with Darby Allin, big-time superstars in AEW. Just the fact that Ricky Starks coming from NWA and then coming to AEW just says a lot that he's pretty much the guy who can carry as far as, like, promos go. Obviously, Brian Cage and Powerhouse Hobbs don't really talk as much in the ring, but Ricky's the one who's doing most of the talking. And if he's not talking, then it's Taz who does most of it. But it's good for them, and it's making it personal, like you said. What Taz did to Cody, this can actually make the feud more legit, and having Darby Allin just look on what's going on overseas, just looking up on the overview. Not much interaction between Cody and Darby, even though they're like they've had their feud before, but now they have a common enemy. And so this feud is escalating to something big, which can also result to maybe Ricky is going to have a title shot in the future up against Cody. I don't know when it comes down to that, or maybe for the TNT title as far as that goes in the future. But as far as I don't know, the feud seems to be. It's going to take a while for me to get invested, but it seems to me it's starting to puzzle up for something else, something big, and that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
RKJ, now I'll toss this to you. This is an idea I have. You want something big to come out of this storyline, right? And I personally don't think it's Cody versus Hobbs. It could be Cody versus Cage, but I still don't think that's that big. I don't think it's Darby Allin in the title match versus Cage or Ricky Starks or Hobbs. I think it's Cody versus Taz. Do you think there's any chance that we have Taz return to the ring against the face of AEW? And I think at least those are the two biggest names. I know we have Shaq potentially on the horizon, which is ridiculous. But okay, let's not talk about that right now. What do you think at least about? Sorry.
You know what's going to happen too? The NBA starts in a few weeks. Cody's going to show up on the internet. You do realize that's going to happen the first.
You brought it up, Nick.
Shaq. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to change. I'm going to change the top. Okay, so this RKJ. This obviously is going to lead to Cody versus Shaq. So why am I even putting other stuff in? Is Shaq going to be part of Team Taz? Is Shaq going to be on AEW Dynamite today?
He's not going to be on AEW Dynamite today because you want to announce Shaq. And I personally think if you want to do something with Cody and Shaq, why not do it opening night inside the NBA after the Lakers play and we whoop anybody's ass who were playing on opening night. I don't know what it is. It's probably your crappy Clippers, Nick.
That would not be a good matchup to have the Lakers be playing on the opening night. I'm just saying.
It's going to happen.
You want to play the Knicks or somebody, not the Clippers.
Trust me, we're beating your ass. But anyway, the fact of the matter is, after that, you have Cody show up and, get into a little verbal spar with Shaquille O'Neal, have Charles Barkley there. Hopefully Charles Barkley don't mention anything stupid about the WWE. Okay. When AEW is the competition and you have AEW on your network, Charles Barkley, take
They
notes.
have had the AEW guys in there before, though, so I think he knows the difference now.
So we, do something there, and then something blows off, and then you have Shaq at the beginning of next year on Dynamite, and you get an opportunity to advertise it. But honestly, this is all leading to Cody Rhodes turning heel. It's going to happen eventually. This is a slow burning heel turn for Cody. Yes.
Quick question: would Shaq get a title shot though? Would he get a title shot in the future? It seems to me that you're prepping up a feud between him, and I'm like, okay, so looks like he's going to be in the title mix.
Well, yeah, I guess. He's Shaq. Well, what else? Why else have this match? But if you do that,
ratings.
It's just, it's gonna get ratings, but it's like, what are we doing here? Is this old WWE? This is everything we did not want with AEW is to be WWE. But I think this is going to eventually, this whole feud, this whole situation, Cody constantly getting challenged. He's been getting challenged ever since AEW has been brought to light. I think eventually he's going to turn heel. He's going to snap. He's going to turn heel. And we'll talk about it later, but I do think there is money in a Jon Moxley, Cody Rhodes feud near the end. So I think that's something that we could do later on in the year. Maybe as we get closer and closer to Renee having the baby, you can have Cody Rhodes write off Jon Moxley. I would think that would be a perfect way to write it off, but we'll talk about that later. But I think eventually Cody Rhodes will be going to the dark side. It's just too obvious. And the way he acted in that matchup against Darby Allin at Full Gear, we didn't really get to talk about it, was very heelish. He lost because of his stupidity. He was overconfident. He was being cocky. And we kind of know that Cody can get like that sometimes. Eventually, it's going to happen. He's going to snap.
Well, here's the thing. Cody versus Jon Moxley in the future for an AEW Championship match is contingent on one thing, and that's Kenny Omega not winning it on this show tonight. So let's get into it. Perfect transition. This is the biggest match in AEW Dynamite history. This is the biggest match I can honestly remember on a wrestling television show, not a pay-per-view, in a very, very long time. I can remember John Cena versus Randy Orton, John Cena versus CM Punk back in the early 2010s. Those kind of matches happening on Raw, the anniversary shows, these huge title matches. But realistically, you look at Kenny Omega, who I believe was just rated he's in the Hall of Fame now somehow in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, and Moxley's the number one wrestler in the world. So we really are having this super matchup. That yes, they've had a match, but it was, it was violence, it was garbage cans, it was thumbtacks. Yeah, it was uncensored. Now we have a one-on-one match. This is a legitimate dream match. I'm here for it. I'll give my take on this first, man. I just think, first of all, I'm hearing rumors that they're going to give him time after. This is not ending with a time limit at the end of the show. That TNT I apparently is thinking about giving them extra time. Whenever the match ends, that's when it ends, which is what they should do. It's what Raw gets to do. It's what SmackDown used to get to do, and I think would get to do if Fox thought something was big enough. And I think that's the right thing to do. And I want to see this match be the match it should be. There's no pay-per-view on the horizon for there to be this rematch or whatever. This is the thing. It's got this AEW Winners Coming has its own Wikipedia page. That's how you know this thing's legit. All right.
Everybody has its own Wikipedia page.
No, they don't. I'm saying some WWE shows and all these other AEW shows that happen on Wednesdays didn't have this. This is legitimately, something. And I just think that, it's Moxley, it's Omega. Omega's turning heel a little bit. Moxley, it's hard to tell what's going to happen in this match. I have to think it's going to be Moxley winning, but why put this match on TV if you're not going to give it to Omega, right? Why let Moxley just beat him clean? Or something's going to happen at the end of this match, and I don't know what it is. But if I had to predict, I think it's going to be Omega, and I'm down for it because Kenny Omega is one of the reasons, if not the reason, that AEW is in existence. They got the best wrestler that wasn't in WWE and brought him in. So give him your title. You know what I'm saying? It's been over a year, and the guy really hasn't been doing much besides when he had that tag team run. But I think we can all agree that is nothing compared to a singles title or the main title. So I think Omega wins this, but there's some bullshit at the end of this match. And I don't think it's clean, but I think this match ends interesting, and I think it goes overtime. RKJ, what's your take? What do you think happens?
And this is such a difficult match to predict, because on one side of the scales, Jon Moxley has just been dominant in this run. Like, he's barely had any low points in this run, and he's just been that credible champion you've needed for a long time. He's had it since February, and it just feels great, and But on the other side of the scales, you have Kenny Omega, and he's on this role right now as the cleaner. And I feel like the switch kind of happened after he broke up with Adam Hangman Page. He said it's time for the cleaner. Man, it's so tough. I cannot decide. But if I have to be honest, I think it's time to give the title to Kenny Omega. And you really have to submit Kenny Omega as the heel in this fight after this. Okay? Because right now he's been healing, then tweener, then heel, then tweener. No, he needs to go full-on heel, full-on asshole heel. He needs to dig down deep in order to find a way to destroy Jon Moxley. He needs to find something deep inside, cheat, do whatever he's got to do to kill Jon Moxley and to get that AEW World Championship. Now, the question I have for you guys is, could this possibly be AEW's version of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin? I saw this question posed on Twitter. Now, I know it's too early. I think it's too early to ask this question, of course, honestly. But a lot of people are comparing it on Twitter to The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Eric, well, I'll say something about this. Eric's wearing an Ali Frazier shirt right now. And this match has the feel, not obviously the same feel, but somewhat of a feel of an Ali Frazier. Right. And so, RKJ, I at least don't think you're too far off here, because this match is so big. Why can't it be compared to some of the best matches in history? Or if this feud does continue and every year or every other year these guys are connecting, you're looking at Rock and Stone Cold, John Cena Edge, and John Cena Randy Orton, and all these, rivalries where every single time it happened, you were still invested somehow. You've seen it 14 times in a pay-per-view, but you're still invested, and as long as they tell different stories, it could happen. So I think it's possible. Eric, you're wearing the shirt. What do you think about this match, and what do you think about what Ryan's comparisons to maybe this being a great rivalry in wrestling history?
I mean, it can. I kind of probably put him up there with Cena and Orton feud, so to say. As far as also that goes, it's gonna be up there as far as like feuds in pro wrestling wise. Maybe as well as you can probably like go as far as like maybe boxing, like I said, Frazier and Ali as well. But this rivalry, it's been coming up for a while, and this is something that I think, this should have happened at that one. What was it? Fight for the Fall that they had, which the match got canceled, or was it all out?
No, it was all out. It was all out.
Last year it was supposed to happen all out, and then it happened a full year. But then obviously it was unsanctioned match, which supposedly didn't happen, and it was a violent match. It was a brutal match, but it was kind of coming to a point where, like, well, when are they going to have like an official match for the title? And luckily enough, I thought they would have had it again, like maybe at another pay-per-view, like All Out or Full Gear. But no, it's for free on Dynamite. Winter is coming. This is going to be a pretty good match. I would so to say, something that we've been waiting for a long time. I think, in my mind, for someone who has been coming up in the ranks and who has been lately going for that heel so to speak turn, I think Kenny Omega is going to have the edge on this one, and this is probably the time for AEW to sort of test the waters with their stars that are, I guess you can say, homegrown in AEW and not WWE guys. Because if we've been looking these past like what year or so, we've been seeing the title exchange with Jericho and Moxley. Great guys, but they're from WWE. And this is something that we've also been talking about on the podcast. I mean, I think the biggest fear from AEW is that I don't want like them to rely on ex-WWE guys, kind of like what TNA did, where they felt like they would put more trust or they would feel more safe if the belt were to be on the WWE guys, veterans alike. So I think it's time to see what Kenny Omega is all about. Like, can he really carry the company? Can he be the face of AEW? We're going to have to find that out. So if anything, they're going to have to put their faith all on Kenny Omega to carry the company. If that's the case, then I'm seeing Kenny Omega winning this match, and we'll probably see how 2021 will affect as Kenny Omega is the AEW champion, and see if he really can carry the company and be the face at the same time.
I couldn't agree with you guys more on this. I think it's Kenny Omega's time. One thing I do want to mention, if someone doesn't know, is that Kenny Omega is coming into this match with a shoulder injury, and he's admitted this in person that he's avoiding surgery. So maybe there's a way that Moxley wins. Again, I think that's a bad idea if you just make this match to get ratings or you make this match to have it. Like, I don't think that makes much sense. You can have shoulder surgery and you can still have the title. I don't know. That's the biggest heel move you could ever do. You win the title and you go away for 4 months, right? And then nobody can defend the title because you're hurt or whatever it is. So just wanted to mention that if anybody doesn't know, or if either you guys didn't know and hadn't heard the news recently, I think it was this past week, he said he's been dealing with an injury. Kind of a weird thing to say when you're going into a title fight, but whatever. Speaking of
supply some of that CBD oil from RVD and you'll be good to go.
Well, speaking of big fights and speaking of CBD, let's talk about Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. We're going to go back to this past Saturday as you're listening here on Wednesday. We got to talk about this. We got to give our opinions. This card was headlined by obviously Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., a fight that seems so ridiculous, but in 2020 seems like a normal Saturday. And then you have an NBA player boxing a YouTube Disney Channel star also on this card. So, Eric, I'll give you the first take on this. You're kind of the pseudo boxing guy on this podcast. What did you think about the event? And just give your thoughts.
Well, to be honest, I think the actual real fight that really took place, besides the main event, was Ortiz and Segawa, which was a pretty good fight.
That's true. That's
that one was a really, really good fight, and that was in the undercard. So that was entertaining, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is gonna be how the event's gonna be. Like, not really. And
got worse and worse.
Yeah, and then as soon as we got into the Robinson and Jake Paul fight, and I was telling this to my sister's boyfriend. Nate Shepard, I was telling him that, okay, we're going to get into some comedy. We're going to get into some actual legit comedy because we're going to be seeing some YouTubers fight it off, against an NBA player. And so, damn. And you know what, to be honest, I couldn't take the fight seriously because as soon as they just started exchanging, I could just start hearing them breathe heavily. And that's when I said, okay, this is not an actual fight. Just to begin with, it just got worse, and then obviously Robinson, we all know him as him getting knocked out by Jake Paul, and that second knockout that he gave him. Oh man, that was a brutal one, and Jake Paul is already saying that he kind of created like a legacy now, like I'm being undefeated. I'm like, okay, man, this is like, relax.
2-0.
Okay, relax. Like stop trying to call yourself like your Canelo or your Mayweather. Just stop right there. That's when I said, okay, moving on. And I think the commentary between with Snoop Dogg was hilarious. I think.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's a big thing on this podcast. Yeah.
I mean, I'll say this. as far as like the event goes, I think they had too much stalling when it comes down to live performances. You know, I think they should have just like got straight to the fights, but they just decided to kill time with having performance after performance after performance. I'm like, okay, this is great enough, but can we just get straight to the fight? But apparently, I don't know, man. I think like there was just too much killing time, and I think also the commentary team felt a little bit too relaxed, which Israel Adesanya felt like he could talk anything he wanted to say. He started cursing. I'm like, damn, like you guys sound really, really relaxing during the commentary. And I don't know, maybe Snoop Dogg was high during that day. Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Come on, Eric.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. You know, Mauro Ronaldo, and then I think there was a comment that Mauro Ronaldo, he was asked just to kill time. He was asking Sugar Ray Leonard, like, so what do you think about Roy Jones Jr. coming into this fight? And Sugar Ray Leonard's like, well, I have to give you this thought. I mean, I think he's more prepared. Okay, skipping on, we're like Snoop Dogg. What do you think about this fight? Because it looks like Sugar Ray is like this.
I actually remember that. I actually remember that.
Like he put his head down. It's almost like he didn't want to give out like a clear answer. And I'm like, oh man, poor guy. I felt bad for the guy. But getting to the main event, man. The main event itself. Roy Jones Jr. versus Mike Tyson. 51 versus 54. This one was, I guess, the battle that we were waiting for, right? With that being said, I think them exchanging between those two guys, you know, I think that Mike Tyson, he did pretty good as far as like hitting him in the body, like giving him body shots, and that was enough to take out as much air from Roy Jones. I think Roy Jones could have done a little bit much more better, you know, because you know, Roy Jones is probably like the more fresh guy who had his last fight back in 2018. Mike Tyson hasn't had a battle since like 2005. So I would have expected that Roy Jones could have been like the better boxer, but it looks like Mike, he did a good corner him and try to, you know, give him as much body shots, weakening him as much as he could. There was like a pretty good shot that Roy did give to Tyson. Right, I think it might have been like on the left side of his cheek. I think it was either the cheek or the head, on the temple. I thought that was a pretty good way of giving some of the combination shots to him. But I think after that fight, seeing them still go at it, I think after that fight they could have had a little bit more, 3 more rounds, because they said that I could have easily won the fight, Mike Tyson, because we all know that the fight ended in a draw. So I think, in a way, maybe they should have given him 3 more rounds because it looked like they could still go. And Mike Tyson and Roy Jones, it looks like they still got it. Mike, he's willing to do it again. And there's another guy out there who did tell him, stop running away from me. He told him to sign the contract. And this was an old arch enemy that Mike Tyson had in the past. And I think we all know who we're talking about, and that's Evander Holyfield.
Yeah.
So Evander Holyfield wants to challenge Mike Tyson. That's something in the works. I don't know. That's up to Mike. But Evander Holyfield's been training the gym. That's something that I don't know what's for me personally. Maybe seeing after this match, I don't see it happening. But other than that, man, the match, the overall event, I think it was pretty good. I just think that there were some problems within the event here and there, but as much as like the boxing goes, I think like maybe as far as like the true fight of the night, to me, was Segawa and Ortiz. That was probably like the fight of the night, like legit. If I wanted to talk seriously.
Yeah. No, and there were serious moments in this card, and there were not serious moments in this card. And I will say this: at least you did mention Snoop Dogg, and you mentioned Adesanya and all that stuff, and obviously having Moro as a commentator, he's as, you know, I compare him to Gus Johnson in college football as far as the way he broadcasts. He's going to bring a lot of fun into it. Sometimes it almost doesn't sound serious, but at the same time, he's also serious. So an interesting broadcast crew. I will say this, though. During those main fights that actually matter, I'm not talking about Jake Paul, Nate Robinson, and Tyson Jones Jr., Adesanya took it seriously, Moro took it seriously, and Snoop Dogg wasn't on commentary. So I do think that once it did get into the comedy or it got into more the fantasy, they kind of ramped up the fantasy, and Adesanya realized he could say the F word, and Snoop Dogg realized that he was on national TV.
He got comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, and Morrow realized that this wasn't going to be as serious as, you know what I'm saying? And meanwhile, they like you said, Eric, they throw Sugar Ray Leonard in there to be a serious commentator, and he gets thrown out like...
He was the more serious out of everybody, out of the three.
That was his role, though. He should have. For me personally, I liked that version of the event. Now, I only saw the last 2 fights. I didn't see Ortiz and Sagawa. I just came into the broadcast late. I didn't even buy it till the last fight. So I didn't get to see that other stuff, and I wasn't gonna go back because I don't know who those guys are necessarily. I'm not that big of a boxing fan to know who the undercard guys are, but you know, I think if you're going to put like a guy like Jake Paul on these broadcasts, I mean, maybe you do it against a Dylan Dennis who he called out. Obviously, I think Conor McGregor is ridiculous because McGregor beats him. I mean, McGregor is just a professional fighter, and Jake Paul is a 2-0 boxer. So, you know, I don't know if Tyson in his new headspace and the new way he thinks to really fight again and maybe go after someone more legitimate. I'm not saying he's going to fight like a Deontay Wilder or anybody like that. I'm just saying, you know, Evander Holyfield, whatever, like what he discussed. But I do think that, like, when you look at this, the big thing to take away from this is how good Mike Tyson looked. And it did bring back, for someone like me, I never got to see Tyson because I'm just too young. And obviously I can watch replays, but I didn't get to see him live and feel it. I kind of felt like Mike Tyson, like the Mike Tyson fight a little bit. And I thought that was worth the money. I didn't mind the performances. I didn't mind the Jake Paul stuff, and I didn't mind the Snoop Dogg stuff. And I love Morrow on commentary. I'll pay $50 to listen to Morrow on commentary, just to tell you guys that. So that's my take on the fight. RKJ, you didn't get to see the fights live. You had to watch them on replay, but what was your opinion of the overall event?
First of all, let's get it out the way. Snoop Dogg. Fantastic. Put him on everything. Put him on anything. Put him on this NFL on Fox broadcast or NFL on CBS. Put Snoop Dogg and my main man Kevin Harlan on a broadcast together, and that's broadcast gold right there. I just want to say that.
They should have known this. RKJ, did you know that Snoop Dogg broadcasted an entire period of a Kings hockey game a few years ago, too? And I actually watched the game live and didn't know he was doing it until the game itself, because I'm just a Kings fan. And he did great on that, so it shouldn't surprise people how good he did. But sorry, RKJ, I want to mention that, though.
I think that was earlier this year, to be honest. I could have sworn it was earlier this year before the pandemic really went down.
It's a good point. It could have been. It was at least 2019, I believe. But
very recent. And then let's talk about Nate Robinson. Okay, so he was going around saying how he's doing all this for the culture and whatnot, and he's doing it for the athletes. Let's just be honest. He was trying to do this for black people. And guess what? He lost. We don't want your ass, Nate Robinson. You lost. You are not Barack Obama. You are not Michael Jordan, okay? All right? You were terrible that night. You got your ass beat by Jake Paul, okay? So I need you to go in your rabbit hole, okay? Go crawl in there and don't come out to 2021. Maybe not even to 2022, okay? I wouldn't sign this guy if I was in the NBA either, okay? Your ass got beat by Jake Paul, all right? Maybe I'll cross him over the next time I get on the basketball court, okay? All right, so that's terrible, okay? Like, he was trying to do something for the culture, and he was talking this big game on Twitter, and he got knocked the fuck out. Now, let's talk about Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., okay? That 90s, early 2000s nostalgia thing is really coming into play right now. Like, everybody's at home, and everybody wants to get into these old shows. Like, I'm on Netflix watching Sister right now, because it just came out. Okay. All right. That was my show back in the day when I was younger. I had a crush on those twins, and now I'm watching it again. Okay. Now, the fact of the matter is this. These are two 50-year-old men fighting. And you wanted me to pay $50 in a global pandemic with rent almost due to see two 50-year-old men. One of the dudes had to have cannabis before the freaking fight of Mike Tyson, and the other guy got gassed out in the second round in Roy Jones Jr. And you expect me to pay $50 at the end of the month during the global pandemic with rent and everything else going on in the life. It's Christmas time. It's all these other things going on. And you expect me to pay this, and then you want me to see all this for a draw. I'm not going to be doing this, okay? If you're going to have these types of fights, you got to let it go, okay? You got to let these guys actually box. And if one of these guys gets knocked out, then oh well, they're 250-year-olds, okay? The fact of the matter is this, to ask people to pay all this money to see something like Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. just spar competitively for 2 minutes per round for 8 rounds was a waste of money, and whoever came up with that idea should be arrested, okay? They need to be arrested and tried in front of the Supreme Court and the jury. Don't worry about the election fraud that's going out there. Worry about what's going on with the fraud that's going on, asking Americans to pay $50 on Triller, whatever that thing is, Thriller, whatever it is, for Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., where both guys are gassed out. Well, one guy's gassed out, one's on cannabis. It was a waste of time for me. I mean, yeah, Mike Tyson looks good. I made this whole big deal about how 3 generations of the Johnson, my family, are going to watch it. We're not going to watch it. We didn't watch it, okay? We have much more important things to do. We didn't really care about it because when I looked at it and my brother said, okay, do you want to watch the fight? And I said, no, because the fact of the matter is, it was a glorified exhibition, and you're asking me to pay $50. So I wasn't going to watch it. And you know what? Mike Tyson looked okay. He looked pretty good. But if you go up against a real legitimate boxer, hell, if you even put Conor McGregor in there, Mike Tyson might get knocked out. Okay, and his legacy's destroyed. You can just keep on fighting these old people, and we can go off nostalgia, 1990s, you know, the sister, whatever, you know, whatever else we want to watch, and we can keep going off of that because that's all he's got at this point.
I got a real fight for you. Michael Jordan versus Mike Tyson. Just let you know.
The legends of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And we also, RKJ, to bring up the 90s thing, we also just had a reunion of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So everything coming back.
Hey, Snoop Dogg was saying that
Snoop Dogg was on commentary.
Yeah, Snoop Dogg was saying that on commentary when he said, like, "Oh man, seeing Roy Jones and Mike Tyson, like to me, it's like seeing my 2 uncles fighting in a barbecue. Like, come on, Roy, come on." Yeah,
RKJ, have you ever seen your uncles fight at a barbecue before? I just want to ask you that.
We're too busy eating. There's too much good food to eat. All that fighting happens when there's bad food there. That's the reason why you're fighting.
And they fight to cook, whether it's a woman or a man. It doesn't matter. All right. Let's a good transition because we're talking about this fight that doesn't really count, and let's move on to a real motherfucking fight that's happening this Saturday, and that is Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia. Again, we know these guys aren't super famous in the stratosphere of boxing, but I want you guys to know Errol Spence Jr. is as legitimate as it gets. The only reason this guy hasn't been knocking dudes out left and right the past year is because he got one of the worst car accidents you'll ever see on tape. And go ahead and watch it. You can stop the podcast right now to go see what I'm talking about if you don't know about this guy, because it will help build this fight. This guy's comeback from that crash is a big enough story in itself. But Errol Spence Jr., he's undefeated. Most of his fights aren't even close. He had a semi-close fight with another good boxer in Sean Porter in his last fight before the accident. And this guy, Danny Garcia, is a very, very good boxer. He's 36-2. He's up there as one of the big boxers that's kind of underrated in the sport of boxing. Yes, he's not box office draw, but he sure isn't some low mid-carder that's on the Tyson card, right? So this is a legitimate fight. This fight is worth the money if you like good boxing. RKJ, I know you don't know too much about these two guys. You know the history of Errol Spence Jr. Give me your thoughts on the fight first, being kind of a fair weather boxing fan.
Yeah. When I look at this, I see one number that pops out, and that's 42. And that's a combined knockout for both men. 42 combined. It is fantastic to see this fight, and it's really good because we have not gotten that big fight this year.
Yeah.
I do. No, we did have. They seemed like forever ago because it's right before the pandemic.
Wilder and Fury, yeah.
Wilder and Fury.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten a big fight since then, obviously, because of the pandemic and what's been going on with that. I think this is going to be a really close fight. My thing that I'm looking for is the Errol Spence Jr. injury. in the car accident. How is he going to fare coming off of that? He can say, oh, I'm in great shape, I've recovered from that. But once you take that first hit to the body, or once you get that first hit to the head or to the neck or the chin, whatever, that is really going to tell you if you're truly ready to get back in that ring, if you're truly in ring shape. There's a difference between being in shape and in ring shape. And usually it takes a couple fights to get back. So I'm really interested to see how this is going to affect Errol Spence Jr. But, man, you got two guys with massive power, one guy with power, one guy with finesse. It's going to be a good fight to see.
Eric, I have a question for you. Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Crawford. Those names always get brought up in the same light of an absolute super fight. Is there a chance in your mind that Errol Spence Jr. might possibly be thinking ahead to that fight? Because he's the guy that's wanted that fight more than Terrence Crawford. Crawford, I believe he has Bob Arum as his promoter. Bob Arum, one of the guys that is really like, one of those guys that you can't talk about that might not pick the best fights. It's more about the fighters getting money. So in your opinion, could Errol Spence Jr. possibly be looking past Garcia in favor of the huge payday and the top fight with Terrence Crawford?
I think with Terrence Crawford, if anything, seeing that fight that he had with Kell Brook, and I did see that fight between those two and dominated him, TKO, I remember. With that being said, I really think that Errol Spencer is looking ahead. That's why, in a way, the injury and the sustain that they had of the car accident, that may have motivated him. Yeah, I think that one bump that RKJ was talking about, that may have maybe have a little bit of cost of that, might cost him his next fight against Danny Garcia. But I think it's, if anything, that's just added motivation for him to say, okay, I gotta have a fight against maybe a super fight like Terrence Crawford, because who knows if I get into these sort of accidents in the future, or maybe something happens, like life in general. So it's more like maybe like a wake up call, saying I gotta make these fights happen, like Terrence Crawford in the future. And so for Danny, so he's got to go up against a guy like Danny Garcia, whose record hasn't been all that good, to be honest. But I can see Aaron Spencer just mowing him. I think that this fight between those two, they're going to have a hard time. Obviously, they both have had their rivalry up against Porter, but I think Errol Spencer going up against Danny Garcia, it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a challenging one. Obviously, no crowd in this one, right? I don't think there's going to be no crowd except the.
I've been looking to try to confirm that. I don't want to say that it is an AT&T Stadium, and that could mean fans because it's Texas.
Or virtual fans. I'm not sure.
We'll see. I don't know if fans would necessarily make a difference per se, because it's not going to be 40,000 people, but whatever.
Well, I can see this going to the distance between those two, and I think Spencer's going to be the one coming out on top. This could actually give him a leap to go up against Terrence Crawford in the future. And if you really want to go make it big in the next year or so and make a super fight like that, because let's be honest, we haven't had a super fight since Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Yeah. So a big fight to make it happen, Terrence Crawford and Spence Jr. in the future, 2021. And it could be a good year, and it could be also a pretty good recovery year from COVID, from 2020 in general, and just give the fans what they want, and kind of make up, the loss of what boxing suffered from this year. So Spence Jr. and Crawford in the future, but he's going to come out on top in this fight between him and Danny Garcia.
This is it's an interesting fight for me too. I love your guys' analysis on this too. It's right up the alley what I want to talk about too. So I'll just bring up some statistics here. Errol Spence Jr. They have one. Errol Spence Jr. and Danny Garcia have one of the same opponents, and that is Sean Porter. Errol Spence Jr.'s last fight, like I mentioned, was Sean Porter. So was Danny Garcia's. Different timelines, but still. The interesting thing about the Sean Porter-Errol Spence Jr. fight was this was before the accident. And Errol Spence Jr. won the fight. There was a judge that gave it to Sean Porter, but I think most boxing fans realize that Errol Spence Jr. won this fight. But it was closer than a lot of his other fights. Before that, Errol Spence Jr. had beaten the crap out of Mikey Garcia so bad that his corner every single round in the late rounds had to almost beg him not to box anymore. And so maybe we see Errol Spence Jr. You have the Sean Porter fight that was semi-close, a little scare. Then you have the car accident. Now you have this fight against Danny Garcia, another good fighter. You might be looking ahead at Terrence Crawford. I don't know. It's interesting. For Danny Garcia, he is 36-2. One of those losses coming to said Sean Porter, the other coming to Keith Thurman, who Sean Porter beat. And Keith Thurman's a legitimate welterweight champion as well in his own right, and only gave up the title because he was injured. But in the Sean Porter fight, the fight that is has the common opponent of Errol Spence Jr., it was an extremely close fight. The scores were 116-112, 115-113, and 115-113. We're talking about 1 or 2 rounds here between those two guys. I'm talking about Danny Garcia and Sean Porter. So Danny Garcia can stick in there with the best of them. And I just don't want people counting this guy out. I think this is going to be a close fight. And I think with everything that's gone on in Errol Spence's life and what could go on in the future, this is one of those fights, even though it's a superstar, that could be an upset. But I'm going to pick Errol Spence Jr. because I'm not going against my guy. I don't want to see Terrence Crawford and him go at it. And I'd love if Errol Spence Jr. just dominated, to be honest, because then it would make that Terrence Crawford fight so legitimate in the future. But I got to go with Errol Spence Jr. I hope the guy is okay from his car crash. I would hate for that to hurt his career. A non-boxing injury hurt his career. But interesting stuff for sure. Guys, that's the end of this podcast. We somehow reached an hour with only 3 topics. I mean, that just shows you we can talk your ear off. But I think we had a lot of good information in here. Tonight, you have AEW Dynamite. Winner is coming. Omega versus Moxley. That's all I'm going to say right there. And then this Saturday, Errol Spence Jr. and Danny Garcia in the most legitimate boxing match to occur this year in 2020 since Fury and Wilder. RKJ, take it away.
Hey, man, like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, raise a glass in the sky and salute the ring generals.